This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Today's learning should be Le'ilei Nishmas, Meir Simcha, Ben Yitzchak Zev. Today's his yard side, Gimel Tammuz. Neshama Shaban Aliyah, B'Yomei Yosher for his home Mishpacha, Ad Bias Goyal Tzedek. Okay, good afternoon everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to today's Shiur, Tamar Devorah, Parak Beis, the third Middah. So the chapter 2, Parak Beis, began with the idea that a person needs to emulate what is known as Middas HaKesser. And Middas HaKesser is the top Middah of all the 10 Spheros, the most closest, so to speak, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Middah of Kesser is most manifest in a person's head. So the first Middah of Kesser, which is Koilel, everything is a Middah of Anova, and that is because Kesser is constantly focused downward. It's too embarrassed to look back at its creator. It's constantly focused downward to be mative to those, and it never ceases in its benevolence. And nothing is beneath its dignity. There's no siba that will cause an interference with the Middas HaKesser from being mative, and that is the first way of emulating Middas HaKesser through the Middah of Anivos, which is figuratively represented in the angle of the head, so to speak. One should not hold their head high, in other words, feel above others, but rather should hold their head low, meaning one should be focused on everyone to be mative to them. Nothing is beneath their dignity to be mative. Number 2, we learned about one should emulate the machshava of Kesser. And this, in a way, this might be the biggest challenge of the whole Sefer, and maybe in a way the most important limud of the Sefer. What does it mean to emulate the machshava of Kesser? Kesser is the original thought of something, and therefore when it comes to the Bria, the original thought of the Bria is Olam Chesed Yibaneh, and the way we emulate that is in the makom of the Kesser. That is the side of Torah. That is the side of Chachmas Torah Keduma. The same way Kesser is sort of the earliest point of origin, so too the Torah preceded everything. So in the realm of Kesser, even if sometimes Hashem has to mete out judgment, nevertheless, but at the root of it is always the Middas HaChesed, at the root of it is Torah. So too, the way we emulate Kesser is that our mind should always be focused on machshava of Torah, machshava of Chesed, machshava of thoughts about the Ribbana Shalom. We mentioned yesterday that Rav Yecheskel Abramsky was made about himself that from age 20 he never allowed his mind to divert, to deviate from thinking about the Torah. But it's not just Torah, it's emulating Kesser is whatever we go about doing, the initial motivation, the source of it needs to be Torah or Chesed. Today we go to the third Middah, the Middah Hashlishis, and this Middah is reflected in the forehead. And the reason it's reflected in the forehead, if we would ever have to say that somebody has harshness, if there's ever an element of harshness in somebody, it's symbolized in the forehead. A kashay, a metzach, a stubborn forehead. The metzach represents harshness. So, or on the other hand, somebody could have a forehead of Ratzain, of goodwill. So the way we emulate Middas HaKesser is mitzchay lo yi'aboy koishi klal. One's forehead should not contain and reflect any harshness. Ela yidme tamid lemetzach haratzain. It should always be comparable to the forehead of favor, namely the forehead of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sheyiratze as HaKol, that the Rebbeinu Shalom ultimately is appeased by everything. The Rebbeinu Shalom finds goodwill with everything. He doesn't implement constant harshness. Afilu sheyimtza b'nei adam kayasim, even if you encounter angry people. So naturally, when you encounter someone who's angry, you get a little testy and you get a little harsh, and you want to deal with him and meet them up according to their level. No. Even if you encounter an angry person, you should say, okay, I want my forehead to emulate the Creator, a forehead of goodwill. Yiratzem, appease them, v'yashkitem, and silence them. Put them at ease, make them tranquil, b'rutzoynei hatov, through your goodwill. Shekein meitzach haratzain, God's forehead of favor, who tamid roitze, is always being appeased. Umeratze hagavuros umesaknam. He is appeasing all the forces of din, and he is fixing and correcting all the forces of din. So afhu yiratze hagibarim. So too we should talk softly to the harsh people, hamizgabrim kasim, who allow their anger to flare. We all know people who are tough people, angry people, harsh people. Don't run away from them. Try to use them to your advantage, and that is, use them to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Show them goodwill. Speak softly to them. Try to appease them. And you say, why? What am I getting involved in this for? What do I need this for? No, this is an important exercise. By doing so, you are emulating the meitzach, the forehead, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Middah of Kesser. V'hu yinahalem, you should guide them b'ratzain tov, in goodwill. V'yishatev sham. Now, this is not so easy. It's not only about being nice, soft, and refined and edel, but it requires great wisdom. Well, perfect, because as we mentioned, the original chachma is contained in Midas HaKesser. V'yishatev sham chachma gedola. You should join this up with great wisdom. Lahashbis kakas, to soften the anger, shulayavar hagvul, so that the anger does not go beyond the boundary, v'yikalka chas v'sham, and cause damage. So if your kid is angry, don't hide out in your room and let your wife deal with it. No, this is your opportunity. You could utilize the Middah of Kesser. On the other hand, you could also hide out in your room if that doesn't work. No, you should use it to your advantage. Utilize the opportunity to emulate the Middah of Ratzain of the Metzach. Appease the hardened, the hard people, the harsh people, the angry people. V'ye'aseh dugma l'ratzain ha'elyon. You should try to be an example. You should try to be a prototype to God's supernal goodwill. Shehu nimshach min ha'chachma hanefla. This is interesting. It's the Devorah is saying Hashem's Middah of Ratzain. It's not that He's nice or soft. It emanates from Chachma, and that's why this Middah is a manifest of Kesser. B'mitzcha da'atika, on the forehead of Atika, which is a Kabbalistic term, and we'll just leave it at that. Umisham meratza hakol, and from that source of Chachma, Hashem appeases and shows goodwill to all. V'zeh yimashech miyoisai tamid noyach labriyos. Now, where do you get this Middah from? In other words, let's say I don't have Ratzain. I'm a harsh guy. I'm a tough guy. I have a strong forehead. So how do I acquire the Middah of Ratzain? By being pleasant to other people. By being pleasant. That will engender within you the Middah of Ratzain. Midos of Kashois. If your Midos are harsh, if on one hand your midos are harsh with people, they won't be appeased by you. But ratzon and goodwill and the midah of being appeased is engendered when you show pleasantness to people. V'zeh tama Mishnah. This is the meaning of the Mishnah. Koil sheruach habriyos noicha heimenu. Anyone who the spirit of people are pleased with, Ruach HaMakom Noicha Himenu, the spirit of the Rebbeinu Shalom is pleased with you. And this goes hand in hand with what we learned from the Talmud Devorah, that in order to activate the Midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one has to accord themselves down here and emulate Hashem. And as the Talmud Devorah ended off Parak Aleph, that whenever a person is confronted with a situation, it's recommended to try to identify, okay, which Midah do I now have the opportunity to emulate, and by doing so, you will bring that Middah down to the world, because the Talmud Devorah said at the end of Parak Aleph, whenever you encounter a situation, you should say, Harei davar zeh toloi b'midah plainis. This is dependent on a such and such a Middah. Eini roitze lazos mimena. I don't want to move away from that Middah. Why? Shaloi sis'alem v'sis'talei kamidah himen olam. Because I don't want this Middah to leave the world. In other words, by acting in a certain Middah, this is a way to bring that Middah down to the world, and by conducting oneself with Glatstein to other people and showing pleasantness and softness to other people, one will gain that min hashamayim, and this is a way of causing your forehead, so to speak, to emulate the forehead of Hashem. So far we spoke about 3 aspects of the Rosh. The angle of the Rosh, that is humility, the humility of the Kesser. We talk about the thoughts of the Rosh, that's the thought of Kesser. Now we talk about the Meitzach of the Rosh, that is the forehead, the Middah of Ratzon. Okay, everyone, have a great Shabbos, wherever you may be. Shkayach. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Thank you everyone for joining. Baruch HaVatzlach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.